Okay, we are live. We are ready to go. Dr. Hillel Gemara, I believe that we are at the two dots at the top of Ayin Ches Amud Aleph. We talked about having placing the get on the floor in front of her. The Gemara said if it was within her if it was within her dalet amas, and it was on a piece of wood or a board that was an independent piece of board, then it might not be in the same rishus as her. However, if it was on a board that didn't have significance, it would be considered the same rishus as her. Afilu hu ima b'mita. So this is speaking about a woman who is in her husband's rishus. She's in her chutzner, she's in his chutzner or in his bayis, and he gave her the get. Afilu hu ima b'mita eina migureshes. It wouldn't be a good get because the get is remaining in the rishus of the husband. Dr. Heilige Gemara, Omar Rava, Lo Shanu El B'mita Shaloi. This only applies if it was put into his bed. Abu B'mita Shaloi, but if she was in her own bed, Dr. Rashi Afal Pisha B'Soich Beisai, even though this bed of hers is in his home, it would still be Migureshes. Dr. Rashi, because Halkadaitin Taima, Mishum de Kasavar, Caleb Shaloikeach, Rishus Moicha, There's a big shaila in Bava Metzia, I believe. What happens if I'm going to your store to buy something and I place whatever I purchase into my keli, into my box, into my knapsack, but my knapsack is on the floor in your store. So it's my kelim, but it's in your rishus. Will that be kaina or not? So the Gemara says over here that if it was b'mita shalah, which is like her knapsack, her item, then it's kaina. So it seems from Rava that the dik that we'll make for the Mishnah is that kelev shaloikeach is kaina b'shus moicher. Tanya nami haki. We learned the brayso that supports the same thing. Rabbi Eliezer Aimer, b'mita shaloi eina migureshes, but b'mita shalah migureshes. Correct the Gemara uvamita shalom migureshes. Are you going to claim that if it wasn't her mita, it would be migureshes? So you have a raya from here. You have a raya from here that Caleb shaloikeach b'shus moicher. Who? This is the case of Caleb shaloikeach b'shus moicher, and you're claiming that it's migureshes. So you see that the keli of the lekeach and the shmoicher will be kain. Shmas mina Caleb shaloikeach b'shus moicher kana lekeach. You cannot bring a raya from our Mishnah to that fact, because you could say it's speaking the Gavaya Asara. This mita that she was on was 10 tvachim high. If it's 10 tvachim high, that's considered a separate rishus. So that wouldn't be considered Caleb shalakech rishus moicher. It actually will be considered rishus lakech, and therefore you don't have a raya if someone just had a knapsack that he put down on the floor in the store and put a product into it. There you don't have a raya that he would be kaina. Here she had her own bed, which was a larger bed, 10 tefachim. It had its own rishus. It had a status of its own rishus. Well, the case was that it was her bed. The case was in this case that she's on the bed, but I don't know lavdavka, because in the case of Caleb shaloikeach, which was moicher, we're not discussing that he's in the knapsack. He's not in the knapsack. No, and we're going to get into that. If he's holding the knapsack, that's not considered Caleb Shalakech B'Shus Moicher. That's on his person. Yeah, and the Gemara is specifically going to discuss it. That's a good point. So Dubi is making an important distinction. Caleb Shalakech means it's in the Caleb of the Lekech, but the Lekech is not holding on to his knapsack. That's why I made it a point to say the knapsack was on the floor. Will my Keli hold it for you? But if it's on my person, that's a whole different story. Correct Gemara, but Va'ika Makayim Kari. How could you say it's its own rishus? The legs of the bed are resting on the ground in the rishus of the moicher. The Gemara Amakim Kari LaKapin. And Rashi says, Hoyel Gavoyim in Aretz Asara, since the flat surface of the bed is 10 tefachim, even though it has legs that ended up coming down to the ground, Shenoich Lishtamish Tachteha, since it's high enough that you can easily use the area underneath the bed, that's not called in the Rishus and the Moicher, because that space underneath the bed is usable and it's not hampered by the fact that there's a bed there, because anyone on the bed would be considered like on the second level. And since someone's not makbid, we don't look at it like this bed is in his rishus at all. Rashi says, Tosha says, of course someone's makbid. No, I'm not going to let you set up a platform in my rishus. So what Tosha says, it's the point is that a person wouldn't be makbid for his wife to have a bed set up in his place. But of course, he wouldn't really be that pleased if a stranger sets up a platform in his rishus. If she was sitting and he put the get into her lap, that's on her person. Kalta is her personal, her purse like, it's migureshes. Why don't you have the same situation? Kalov shalokeach rishus marchahu. Amar Vido Shmuel kegoyin shoysa kolsa kluyaba. Because this purse was on her person. It was leaning on her. It was hanging off of her shoulder. That's considered on her person. That's not called kalov shel lokeach. That's called lokeach itself. V'chein Amar Rabbi Lazar, Amar Rabbi Oishia, goyin shoysa kolsa kluyaba. Her purse was hanging off of her. Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish Shomer, shura avol b'she'ena kliya. If the purse is tied to her shoulder, but her strap is so long that the purse is still dragging on the floor, that's also considered as if it's on her person as well. As Rashi says, shura avol b'she'ena kliya, ela negreris bekarka b'kosheba. If she walks, it'll drag the purse along the ground, but the purse is not hanging off of her. It's actually on the ground. Nevertheless, that's still considered like it's on her person. Are you calling it something if you put it onto a horse? I don't think so. So is that considered a key mashiach? Could be it is. Yeah, could be it is. Rabbi Adabar Abba Omar kegoyin shoysa kolsa munachas la ben yerchesach. Where's her purse? Her purse is in her lap, in between her legs. So she's sitting down on the floor, and her legs, let's say, are crossed, and she has a purse sitting there. That's what it's referring to. And Rashi says, it's not on her legs. It's actually resting on the ground. It's just in between her legs, like in her lap area. Ein adam makbid al kol mokaim moshe v'shtoi. No one's makbid on the place where his wife is sitting. So therefore, there wouldn't be a problem of b'shus moicher. This is called on her person. The entire time, the area in between her legs, when she's sitting down over there in her lap, that's considered her personal space. No, it's a basket. It's a basket on the floor. And there's no problem of kelov, shalaker, or shus hamoicher. You know why? Because that space where the basket is actually, there's no hakpada on that space. Why is there no hakpada on that space? Her husband was in the basket business, so therefore he has baskets all over the floor. So there's no hakpada from him if she keeps a basket on the floor, and therefore he's not claiming that makom. He has no problem letting her have that place. Rashi says, that's where they're supposed to be. To the contrary, she's like modeling his wares on those. So therefore, there's no problem. It's not a typical rishus hamoicher. Typical rishus hamoicher is get out of my place, get out of my space. But if it's space that I have no problem with other people using, that wouldn't be considered a problem of rishus hamoicher. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, makom cheka kanila, makom kalsa kanila. The place of her lap and the place of her purse or basket is also common to her. Amar of my time of Rabbi Yochanan. What's the svara of Rabbi Yochanan? No one is ever makbid on a person's personal space, even if that person is in their rishus, their personal space. No one's makbid on it, and it's assumed having been given or relinquished to the person themselves. If a get was thrown into her lap, or into her purse, or any other personal thing that she has. It would be migureshes. Why? Because the husband surely is not makbid on that place that he considers hers. He won't infringe on that. Kol davar shehuka kalsa lasuyimai. Rabbi Yochanan, the Brisa made a broad statement. Anything that's like a kalsa. What other type of purse, type of container are we considering to be similar to a purse? Lisuye taska the achlaba tamari. It's a little container that she has that she keeps dates in, that she eats her dates out of. It's like her personal snack box. That's considered her domain. That would be kohen. Okay. Now we're going to get into the halacha of nesinas haget. When you give a get, if someone hands his wife a get, does he actually does he have to say hareis a get, or can you just hand it to her? So let's see what the Mishnah says. Amar la, he told her, I guess he was a wuss, and he didn't want to identify to her that he's giving her a get. He was embarrassed to face her, I guess. And he told her, Kinzi shtar choiv zeh. Could you please take this shtar choiv from me? So it's rolled up. She can't read what it says. He passed it off as a shtar choiv. Or she found it behind him on the floor, and she picked it up. Koira, she read it. Varehu Gita. And it turns out that it's her get. The halacha is a get. It's not a get. Until he says hagitech. So this, in and of itself, poses a huge problem, because from this case it's mashma. Yes. Okay, so that's a good hour. That's a good hour. So we'll get to that in a second. But let me ask you a question. It's mashma that the reason why he had to say hagitech her is because she thought it was something else. So what if she didn't think it was something else? I can give it to her without saying hagitech, right? It's only here because the circumstances seem to be radiating the misconception that this is not a get. So you have to clarify that it is a get. That's what the Mishnah seems to be saying. But if I actually give her a get, I can give it to her in silence. And that's what the Mefarshim tell us, is that you don't have to say hareis hagitech ever unless there's from the circumstances it seems that it's v'dafka not a get, like in these cases. The Rashi says, even if he only said this after she already had it, so then the nesinas haget was done without the proper knowledge, as long as later on he identifies that this is a get, that will be good enough. So Duvi's asking if I can give her a get bal korchoi, so why can't I give her a get without her knowing that it's a get? Right? That's your question. Okay, so let's see how that comes out in the Gemara. Nosam biyada. What if he puts the get into her hand, but he is shena, and she was sleeping at the time, so she's unaware. Niura, if she woke up, Kaira, and she reads it, Hareu Gita, Eina get, it wouldn't be a get, until he says Hagitech. So again, Duvi will ask, I don't understand, if I can give it to Bakarcha, why can't I give it to her when she's sleeping? Let's see what the Mishnah says. Let's see the Gemara. I think that's going to come out in the Gemara. I'm not answering you because I know the Gemara is asking it. I don't have the answer yet, but I think we're going to find it. He Amar La Hagitech. When he said Hagitech, my happen. What would it make a difference? The problem is, at the time he gave it to her, it wasn't a good nesina because she didn't know what it was. So if at the time of the nesina it wasn't a good get, even if after the nesina he tells her hagita, it's too late, because it's as if he told her to pick up the get from the ground because it wasn't a proper nesina. The Amar Rava, and Rava tells us, so I think the answer to your question is, as I'm learning the Gemara, it's coming back to me, is that what I said earlier. You don't have to say hagidech. She's mugresh b'karchai. But if I say take this shtar, that could be me declaring this is not a get. Well, it's not because I'm deceiving her, because it's sort of I'm making a declaration this is not a get. Right? And that's where the problem is. Maybe I'm not giving it l'shem gershon. Zok to Gemara, it's not a problem of tzligitech melgabe karka. So the case that we're specifically referring to is the case in the Mishnah, which is Osho Matzasei Me'achayrav. If she finds a get from the floor, she picks it up and takes it. And then he says, Hagitech, the fact of the matter is she took the get from the floor, he didn't hand her the get. So how could that possibly be a good get? Rashi says, he had it stuck in between his belt, inside his belt, and she pulled it out of his belt. So she took it directly from him. Correct Gemara, that doesn't work either. A get has to be given to her, not taken by her. He has to hand it to her. He like pushed his hip out towards her as if to present the get. It's almost like he's reaching out his hand to hand it to her. He puts his hip out, come take this get. Correct Gemara, we have a brisa to support that this would be a good nesina. Amala kinti shtachoiv zeh oishe shel fosei me'achayav karasoi barei ugita ein get. It would not be a get achi yomer la hagitech until he specifically tells her hagitech divrei Rebbe. Rab Shimon Elazar Omer la olam ein get. It would never be a get ad sheyitlena himena. So again, Rebbe says you can fix a problematic nesina. You can fix a problematic nesina by saying hareza gitech later or hagitech later. Rab Shimon Elazar, you can't fix it. You have to do a complete redo. Rab Shimon Elazar Omer la olam ein get ad sheyitlenu himena. You have to take it back from her. Yachzor v'yitnenu la, and he has to give it to her properly. V'yomer la hagitech. So that is the halacha. Zok to Gemara, Nasnu b'yada v'yashena, which was the last case of our Mishnah. Niura, she woke up v'koyra b'areu gita. Then we say eina get achi yomer lo hagitech divrei Rebbe. And once again, Reb Shimon ben Elazar says achi yitlenu eimena v'yachzer v'yitnenu la. So while Rebbe says you can just fix it by saying hareza gitech after the fact, Reb Shimon ben Elazar requires a complete do-over. How long after could you say it for? I'm not sure what the exact timing is. You need this halacha told to us about the machloikis that Shimon ben Elazar requires a full do-over in both cases. Sign the case where the nesina wasn't done properly, and sign the case where the nesina was done when she was sleeping. If we only know the machloikis in the first case, where it wasn't the proper nesina, only there will Rebbe say that you don't need a do-over. You just have to say right now, hagite. A woman who is in a full conscious state is in a condition to be migoreshes. As Rashi says, she's awake. All that's missing is him identifying that it's giving her a get. Therefore, her Kabbalah was good. It just needs clarification. It can be provided later. Exactly how much later do we ask? I'm not sure. But I will not be other Yeshana. But in the second case of the Mishnah, where she was sleeping when he gave it to her, the lav bas igrushihi, a sleeping woman is not someone who could be migoresha. She's not conscious. Maybe Rebbe would agree that there you have to do a complete do-over. Kamash Fulani argues there as well. And if we only have the case of a woman who's sleeping, that it has to be done over. Maybe only there does Reb Shimon and Elazar say that you have to do it over. Abu Bahach, but in the case where he gave it to her and she thought it was a shtarchoid, maybe you would agree to Rebbe that you don't need to do a do-over. Shricha, that's why the machlokes was stated in both cases. Amar Rabba, cause of get, he wrote a get to her. V'nosnoi b'yad avda. He put it into the hands of her Eved, Yoshan, but the Eved was sleeping in Umishamartoi, and she's watching the Eved, which means that he's basically putting it directly into her control, because it's not controlled by the Eved. If the Eved is sleeping, it's controlled by her watching the Eved. So the halacha is hareza get, it would be a get. But near, if the Eved was awake, then ain't a get. Why? The Havilei Chatzar Mishtamer Shaloi L'Daita. If the Eved is awake, he's of independent mind. And therefore, she's not watching that get. The get is being watched by the Eved. That's not called v'nosan biyodai. As Rashi says, near in a get, Eved nishamer satzmai, v'esmasha biyodai. And the Eved is conscious. He's in control of himself, and he's in control of what's in his hands. And like we said yesterday, that whether or not you hold like a ula, that she has to be standing beside the chutzner when her husband throws a get into her chutzner, or even if you hold like a boishia, that she can be far away, but she has to be in control of that property. And the Eved that's awake is independent. He's not considered in control of in her control. Okay, about it. Even if he's sleeping, but the fact is he's a being that could be mobile. And even if he's not mobile right now, but he is someone who could be mobile, the chotzer ma'alechas loikana. So how the chalal could the Eved be used as a chotzer with which the woman can be kind of her get? V'chitema yashan shiny. And if you're going to say, well, he's sleeping now, so he's not mobile at this moment, if something can walk, and while it walks, it won't be kind of, because it's called a chotzer ma'alechas. Even if it happens to be stationary at this point, it's still not kind of, it still has a status of a chotzer ma'alechas. The more of a hilchas of a compass. The teretz is that's only if he was tied up. If the Eved was sleeping and he was restrained, so he cannot move, even if he would want to, that's not called a chotzer ma'alechas, and therefore, if the husband places the get on her sleeping Eved and she's watching it and controlling it, that would be a good kapolas again. What if she was standing in Rishus Harabim? This is the sugya about giving a get with no strings attached. She was standing in Rishus Harabim, v'zar koila, and the husband threw the get to his wife. Karivla, if the get is closer to him, it's closer to her, migareshes. And we'll see exactly what that means, and there will be a fair amount of controversy about that. Karivloi, if the get didn't get so close to her, it's still closer to him, he doesn't have such a good arm, Eina migareshes. She won't be migareshes. Mechta al mechta, if it's exactly in the middle, notice it's not a sofek, it's exactly in the middle. Migareshes ve'eina migareshes. It's shishavik migareshes, and once again, Reb Zera told us that when the Tana uses such a line of migareshes ve'eina migareshes, the Tana is telling us subtly that he has to support her. V'chein l'inyan kedushin, and the same thing would happen if he threw her ring at her and said aret v'gudeshetli. Or if you're being mekadesh, probably it means if you're being mekadesh with a star. And the same thing will be if you're paying back a choy. And the Mishnah elaborates. The Bachayv told the Loiva, who was standing far away in Rishus Harabim, throw me the money. And he threw the money to the Malva, and then the money went missing. The money went missing. Someone came and snatched it up. So the halacha is karib l'malva, zacha malva. If the money landed first, closer to the malva, then we'll say the malva was already coined, and it's the malva's money that went missing. Karib l'loiva, but if the loiva didn't have such a strong arm, and it fell closer to the loiva, and then it went missing, haloiva chayiv, the loiva is not responsible because he had not returned the money. Mechta al mechta, once again, if it was exactly in the middle, then shneim yachloiku, they split the money. It's called Mammon Hamutul B'Sofik. You don't say a Moitze Mechaver Olav Haraya, because a Moitze Mechaver Olav Haraya is when you don't know what the status is. Is it closer to me? Is it closer to you? So then the Moitze Mechaver is Olav Haraya. But here we don't have a Sofik. We know it's exactly in the middle, and therefore it's a Mammon Hamutul B'Sofik with the Achloik. Zok Gemara Hechi Dami Karav Law. The Hechi Dami Karav Law. What does it mean nearer to him, nearer to her? And the question is obvious. If we're in Rishus Harabim and I throw something and it lands as near you 100 feet away, you're not coin it, right? So how does this work? Arba Amoy Shalah, if it falls within her Amoy, within her 4 Amoys, Zeu Karav Law. Arba Mishallah, Zeu Karav Law. There's a Kinyan de Rabbanon, as Rashi tells us about Mitzidaf Yud, the Gemara tells us that Dalet Amish Shal Adam Koinus Loi. Chazal made it takana, this is not a Kinyan de Raisa. Chazal made a takana that when something is within my dalar amas, within what we would say my personal space, I'm koined. And they made that takana so that there shouldn't be fights. Imagine I'm within 4 amas of an aveda or a mitzvah that I find, right? I find something lost. I find a gold watch that has no simon. I find it on the street, and I'm about to go lean over and get it, and someone Speedy Gonzalez comes from far away and snaps it up, right? So I'm sorry, so snatches the cup exactly. Then the halacha is we say that I was already koined, and that the koined was made to avoid fights, because otherwise there would be fights. Slow, sluggish people would constantly be fighting with the fast, nimble people. So the Gemara is going to get to that. For sure, it wouldn't be a good get because she wasn't koined, right? So it would be a good get. There's a famous story with Joe Lubavitch. You know the story of Joe Lubavitch? He drove a Bentley, I think, right? And he was once backing into a spot, a parallel park, like along a curb, let's say maybe on Edmonton Avenue, I think it was. And as he's slowly maneuvering in, a little Honda Civic with those neon lights on the bottom, and a little Filipino zips in. So he zips in to the spot, and Joe's like frustrated. I mean, you see him in the middle of backing into the spot. So he tells Joe Lubavitch, he gets out and he gives him a chipper. It's good to be small. It's good to have a small car. So Joe doesn't answer. He puts his car into reverse and he backs right into this Honda Civic and crumples it into a ball of aluminum foil. And you see this Filipino guy, his face is melting, his whole life savings just got crumpled into a ball. Then he takes a check out of his pocket. He writes out a check for $20,000 and says, here's money for a new car. It's better to be rich. No? A good story doesn't have to be the truth, so please don't mess up my narrative with your facts. Okay, come on. Okay. Okay, so Zok to Gemara. So Karav loy, Amar Abba Arba Shalot, Zo Karav lo, Arba Mashaloi, Zo Karav loy. Hey Chedami Mechta Mechta. Amar Shuba Yitzchak, Kegoin Sheyishneim Oimdim Bi Arba Amos. They were both within the same 4 amos. So therefore, it's in both of their places. For the Gemara, that wouldn't make sense. Whoever was in that 4 amos radius first, he's coined in a space. The second guy who comes is encroaching on that other person's space. Im kadam hu lavoy, then zacha b'chol arba amos, and it's his, and then it wouldn't be a good get. Im kadam hi lavoy, if she was there first, zachsa b'chol dalar amos hasmuchas la, v'shuv lo nichnesa schusay l'soichai. So sure it should be again. So what's the case of mechta mechta? And if you're going to say that they both arrived at precisely the same moment, well, it's impossible that they were both there precisely at the same time. El Amrav Kahana, I'll tell you what the case was. So you see, the Gemara doesn't say that they were further than 8 amos apart. It was in the middle. They for sure wouldn't be a good again. The case is they were exactly 8 amos apart. So the border in between each of their dalet amos are touching each other. The get yoytze me arba amos shaloi l'dalet amos shaloi, and the get is precisely part way in his space and partly in her space. Break the Gemara, so that couldn't possibly be a good get because that means he's still holding on to it. Right? When he gives her the gets, he's got to let go. If it's still in his rishos, he didn't let go yet. El Rabbi Rabbi Yosef, the Amri Tarvayu, Hachal b'shtei kitei edem askim. You know what it means? Mechsal mechta. It's because there's 2 sets of edem. Achas oimeres karav loy. The achas oimeres karav lo. One says that it was closer to her, and one says that it was closer to him. So one says it was her dalet amos, and one says that it wasn't his dalet amos, and therefore we don't know if she's migureshes or not, and therefore it remains a song. That was the first part that we had. That karav law and karav loy means it's within their dalet amos. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, no, karav law shaninu afilu meya amos. Even if it's 100 amos away from her, but it's closer to her than it is to him, she's also koined. The karav loy shaninu afilu meya amos. Why would it be koined? We'll have to see in a minute. But heichi dami mechsal mechsal. So what's the case of mechsal mechsal? Rab Shaman bar Abba l'didi mifreshal l'minei Rabbi Yochanan. How would I understand Rabbi Yochanan's opinion of Karev means Karev? It means closer, whether or not it's far away or not. It's hu yachal l'shoimroi v'hi eina yachal l'shoimroi. It depends on who is able to control this get. If it falls closer to her, then if it falls closer, meaning not that it's physically closer to her, but it means that she's able to control it better. Like for instance, let's say it's 1,000 amas from her, 50 amas from him, but in that 50 amas there's a big river, so he can't really get to it. So he can't really protect it. If there's someone who's coming to take it, he won't be able to prevent it because he's blocked by the river. So therefore, if she's the one who could protect it, then we say it's Karev law and it will be a good get. If he's the one who could protect it, then we say it's Karev law and it's not a good get. So let's see Rashi. Mishmeid Rabbi, that's Amru Kamed Rabbi, which is Vaitir. So the Gemara tells us that Rabbi Yochanan told us Karev means Karev even if it's far away, and Rabbi Shaman bar Abba helped us understand what Rabbi Yochanan meant, and Rabbi Shaman bar Abba told us that what it means is Yachal l'shoimroi, v'hi ein Yachal l'shoimroi, zeh Karev loi, he Yachal l'shoimroi, v'hu ein Yachal l'shoimroi, zeh Karev loi. Shneim Yachal l'shoimroi. What if they're both close enough to it that they're both of them are able to protect it from an intruding third party? Then Shneim or Shneim ein Yachal, or neither of them are able to protect it. Zeu mechzal mech. That would be considered mechzal mech. Amru Rabbanan kameid Rabbi Yochanan. The Rabbanan told Rabbi Yochanan mishmeid Rabbi Yochanan. So first we had Rabbi Shaman bar Abba sharing with us pshat in Rabbi Yochanan's words. Then the Amoraim related to Rabbi Yochanan that Rabbi Yochanan said the same thing. Rabbi Yochanan also explained Rabbi Yochanan's words as having meant if it's Yachal or Shomer. That's the definition of Karev Law in Karev Law. So Rabbi Yochanan was very impressed with Rabbi Yochanan's understanding of what he said. And he said as follows. Now let's see who lived where. Mishmeid Rabbi Yochanan Hachi, Kidapash Rabbi Yochanan B'Yachal L'Shomer. Right? Rabbi Shaman explained Rabbi Yochanan's words, which Rabbi Yochanan said that it all depends on if I could watch that object. That's called Karai. Rabbi Yochanan mi Babel hu v'olol Eretz Yisrael. Rabbi Yochanan was from Babel, and he came up to Eretz Yisrael later. And what happened was, when Rabbi Yochanan heard that Rabbi Yochanan said over this good pshat, the same pshat as him, he said, Yodin chavrin bavloi lefrushe hihaitaima. I see those people from Babel, Rabbi Yochanan, referring to Rabbi Yochanan, they're good, they're pretty good. They also thought of my pshat. I'm very impressed that they understood the right pshat. Hani nami hachi. We have a brayso that supports Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Kol Shoi Karev Law Miloi. If the get is closer to her than it is to him, and Rashi says Hashta Mashma Abba Bisha Karev Law Yoser Mimenu. Even if it's actually in distance, it's closer to her than it is to him. And the Gemara continues, Uva Kelav Anoitloi. But a dog could come and take it away, and she won't be able to prevent that from happening, even though it's close to her. Eina Migoresha. It wouldn't be Migoresha. Eina Migoresha, it would not be Migoresha. So we're assuming here, Rashi says, we're assuming here at this point is that it already fell, it was already closer to her, and then a dog came and took it away. The problem is, if she was already koined, why do I care if a dog took away her get after she was already koined and after she already became Migoresha? What is she expected to watch this get forever and ever? Once she officially has received the get, she's Migoreshes. She no longer has to hold on to the get. So why are we concerned if a dog took it away? This is what the brayso must mean. If it's closer to her, the iluba kelev not loy. Not that a dog actually came after it fell, but it's a litmus test. Even though it's physically closer to her than it is to him, but if a dog would try to come and take away that get, he would be able to, the husband would be able to shoo away the dog, but she wouldn't be able to. For instance, there's a river in between her and that get. So even though she's physically closer as far as linear feet, but she can't really get to it, then Eina Migureshes. So that highlights the concept that we said earlier. Sharon Rabbi Yochanan is all totally on if I could control it. So it's not a matter of distance, it's a matter of if I'm able to control that space, if I'm able to protect that get from anybody else taking it away. Amar Shmuel Rabbi Yehuda. Shmuel told Rabbi Yehuda, Shinina. So I just want to point out, it's far away from her, but it's Yachal Shaymer. Pashtus, it's even B'Shus Harabim, it will still be a good get. So you see clearly, this is not Kinyan related. It's another place where you have a highlight. It wouldn't be a Kinyan. If I wanted to give you a gift, you won't be kind if it's not in your Dalet Amos. Even if you could prevent somebody else from taking it away, it's not a Kinyan, but it's a Nesinas Aget. And the Nesinas Aget does not have the same halacha of Kinyan. It's merely a Nesina. Amar le Shmuel Rabbi Yehuda, Shinin a sharp one. I don't think it's going to be a good get. Kadesha Tasuach V'Sitlen. She has to be able to bend down and pick it up. As Rashi says, Kadesha Tasuach V'Sitlen, who to have a kurva de. What does the Mishnah mean that it's close to her? It means it's close enough that you can bend down and pick it up. So first of all, Shmuel said that it's not within Dalet Amos, it's not Korv Lo like Rabbi Yochanan said. It means it's so close to her that she can actually bend down and pick it up. And if it's there, then it's a good get. Nevertheless, I still don't want you to be matter a woman until she actually is holding the get in her hand. There was a case where it was really close to her, but she didn't actually pick it up. And before she actually picked up the get, her husband died. We were choshed that maybe she was not migureshes because she didn't have the get in her hand yet, and therefore they required that she should have chalitza. And on this conclusion, there's an important thesis. Does it actually have to come into her hand? So what Tosis tells us is as follows. Don't allow a woman to go free, Shmuel said, until she actually has to get in her hand. Where do we require that the get should actually be in her hand? That's if this Nesina was done in Rishus Harabim, where she wasn't actually koine. But if the get was placed into her chotzer, then ain't tzarech shegiel liyada kidarmin loyal. Right? Remember we said the fellow who was sick and he couldn't handle the get on Shabbos because it's muksa, so she just had to be koine the room that it was in. And you see she's migureshes because even if he died on Shabbos, it would be a good get and she would not require chalitza. So clearly, our Gemara here that discusses not to let a woman go free and consider her migureshes until she has the get in her hands, that's only if it's given to her in Rishus Harabim. But if it was put into her chotzer, surely she would be migureshes even though she didn't have the get in her hands. Umiu, the Orach Be'erach get kasa. The Orach writes in the Sugya of get, Kibalnu me'Rabbi Seinu, we were makabel from our Rabbeim, afilu zorkei lo b'soy chatzera, even if he throws the get to her and she is within her chotzer, like mystery la alma, we wouldn't allow her to remarry ad mata gita liata until she's actually holding the get. Umaisi, and he brought a raya mehodamina b'Yerushalmi. Like the Gemara says in Yerushalmi, hamachmer shebekulam achet tina liata. The most chomer kashita is that it should actually be in her hand. If you want to be machmer l'chol adayos, make sure the get is in her hand. They ain't a right, but you don't really have a right from that Yerushalmi. The Ikala Meimar, the Mari B'Shus Harabim. You can say that the Gemara Yerushalmi that says that Sheyitenu Liyada is referring to a case where all this occurred in B'Shus Harabim. The Behedya Masak Law, Akar of Law, Akar of Law. The Gemara in the Yerushalmi is referring to our Mishnah of Kar of Law, which would indicate that it was in B'Shus Harabim. So therefore, there's a question in Tosfos if in the regular case of get were done in her Rishos, would it need to be in her hands or not? I think nowadays we always put the get directly into her hands. Okay, let's see the Gemara Vayter. Let's see the head of the Gemara Vayter. V'chein l'yin kedusha. The Mishnah says the same way we consider it hers l'gabe gerushin, that's how we treat it l'gabe kedusha. Amar Abasi Amar Yochanan, leGittin amru v'loy l'davarach. This halacha applies only to Gittin and not for other things such as kedusha. And Tosfos speaks out. Why would Gittin be different? The Tosfos quotes from Rashi, Pirush B'Kundros, Mishum de beget nesina b'karcha have nesina. You see, by get you don't need the regular halachas of nesina because you can even give it b'karcha. Okay, Zokt to Gemara, Esei Rababel Rabasi. How could you say that it's v'loy l'davar achar? How could Rabasi say to them of Rabbi Yochanan v'loy l'davar achar? Our Mishnah says v'chein l'yin kedushin. Doesn't our Mishnah say that this same halacha applies to kedushin as well? Zokt Gemara, sure. Shiny hasam yichsiv yatzav v'haisa. Kedushin is like Gittin because there is a hekesh from kedushin to gerushin to tell us that the same halachas that you find by gerushin, you find by kedushin as well. Correct Gemara, but that doesn't help us. Didn't our Mishnah say specifically that this also applies to when you're returning a chayv? Directly chayvi v'zarkaloi karv l'malva zocha hamalve karv l'loiva haloiva chayv mechta mechta shnei mechloitu. Right, that was the last part of our Mishnah. So you see, it applies not only to gerushin, it applies to other things as well. So Gemara haka b'may askinon the amarle the malva invited the loiva. Please throw it to me. Directly chayvi v'sifater. The malva said, throw it to me and you'll be potter. So the reason why we say the malva is koinit, even though it's non-conventional, is because the malva said, if you throw it to me, that will be good enough. You'll be potter from the chayv. Why would the Mishnah tell us such a crazy case? That if the malva says, if you throw it to me, I'll moichel the chayv, it works. What's the chiddush of that? Because now we're discussing if the same principle applies to the malva. No, the question is not that it's far-fetched. The question is, such a case is not a chiddush at all. He said to finish, throw it to me and you'll be potter. So it doesn't matter if I'm cutting it or not, right? I said this is all you have to do. The guy was a nudnik. The Malva said, throw me the money, and whether or not I'm considered having to receive it, should follow the rules of Gittin. Again, a far-fetched case. Correct the Gemara, v'akati my lememra. Vayte what's the chiddush? We know what the halacha of gerushin is. The Gemara, ma'od tema matzi amarle mishatari bach. You might think I could have said, you think I really meant you should be potter? I was just joking you. I was fooling you. Kamash malon. So we're speaking about a real nudnik over here. Zok the Gemara vayter. Amar b'chista. Get biyada mushicha biyada. This is called giving a get with a string attached. You gave her a get, but you're still holding on to a string. Im yachol nakoi ulavia etzloi. If you could pull it out of her hand with the string, migareshes. Ain't no migareshes. It won't be migareshes because clearly you're still in possession of it. But if it's a very heavy get, as Rabbeinu Tam explains, and even if I try yanking it, I won't pull it back, migareshes, it would be migareshes. My timer, what is the reason? But inon krisos faleka. Then you need to be cut off from him. If he can still pull it back, it's not considered a get krisos. Amar Yehuda. What happens if Hoysa Yada Asuya Kitafers? She held her hand on the angle down, so anything that hits it won't stay in her hand. It'll just bounce off her hand and fall to the floor. V'zar Koila, and he threw the get to her. Apal Pisha Gi Get Liada, even if the get actually gets to her hand, Edom Gureshes. Amai, I don't understand. Haki Nafil Ba'arba Amos Tidaka Nafil. Even if it didn't go into her hand, it's obviously within her Dalit Amos. It's speaking where it never landed, as Rashi says. It got burnt up. There was a fire there, and it never really landed. What's the problem? We know that the avir of Arba Amos, it comes into even in its airspace, it's also going to be koyah. So big deal, it was never enough. Maybe you should bring a raya that the avir of Dalit Amos is not koyah. The boy Rabbi Lazar Arba Amos Amru Yesh Lan Aver or Ein Lan Aver. Tivshat being a raya from here, the Ein Lan Aver, and that's why she's not Migureshes if it fell into her hand and then it burnt up. So tomorrow by Medes al Gabe Hanor. She's standing on the river and she's holding her hand off. There it's never going to land on the ground. It's going to land on the water and get flushed away. That even if you hold that Aver is koina, Aver is only koina if it's eventually going to rest. So while it's in the air, it'll be koina. But if it's never going to rest, that's not considered avir. The mikara leibud kai. As it's coming down, it's going to get destroyed, and therefore it wouldn't be a good get. No, she could be in the water. She could be in the lake. Yeah, she could be standing in the lake. Someone throws it there, right? So that's never considered. That's going to be noch in a normal place, and therefore there you wouldn't say that avir is kaina. The funny thing is no, that's right, because it cannot land in Yidal Aramis, because it's landing leibud. That's correct. The Yidal Aramis only works if the space around you can actually contain something. I'm not sure exactly what type of water is considered anywhere in Noch, but I guess if it's a river, it floats, so it never hit the ground. I think the point is it will never be able to hit the ground. I think so. I think that's not going to, because the surface of the water is not considered landed on the ground. It's not like a dry riverbed. Okay, let's stop here and we'll be Mamshech B'ez Hashem tomorrow. I wanted to get into, but we didn't have time, is